My boyfriend kissed the one girl everyone thought he should be with, and somehow I was the one being told not to overreact. It happened during a birthday party. One stupid game, one stupid dare, and one choice that destroyed our entire relationship. The private lounge of the hotel buzzed with laughter as our friend group crowded around a long table. Someone had already lost 3 rounds of truth or dare and was being forced to sing loudly in front of everyone. I sat beside my boyfriend, Jason Carter, trying not to laugh as another round ended in chaos. Jason leaned back in his chair and shook his head. I swear you people get worse every year. That's because we're getting more creative. Dylan replied proudly. Creative isn't the word I'd use. The group burst into laughter. I smiled and took a sip of my drink. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Jason and I had been together for a year. Everyone knew our relationship wasn't a secret. His arm rested casually behind my chair, and every now and then he would lean over to whisper a comment that only I could hear. For a moment, I felt content, comfortable, safe. Then the bottle spun again, round and round, the 4 stopping directly in front of Jason. The room erupted immediately. Finally, it's about time. Jason groaned. Oh, no. The birthday host pointed dramatically. Truth or dare? Dare. The cheers became even louder. I laughed. Of course, he picked dare. He always picked dare. The host rubbed his hands together. Excellent choice. Jason narrowed his eyes. That expression worries me. It should. The room laughed again. The host pointed around the table. I dare you to kiss a girl in this room. Several people immediately started shouting. Before the host could continue, he added, for 2 minutes. The room exploded. People nearly fell out of their chairs laughing. Jason covered his face. You people are ridiculous. Several friends instantly pointed at me. Easy. His girlfriend is literally sitting right there. Easiest dare of the night. Someone laughed. Poor Emma. She doesn't even get a challenge. I shook my head, smiling. Honestly, they weren't wrong. The dare felt harmless. I was his girlfriend. Who else would he choose? Then Dylan groaned dramatically. Boring. Several people immediately agreed. So boring. Nobody wants to watch a guy kiss his own girlfriend. Where's the entertainment? The group laughed. Then someone pointed towards Sophia Reynolds. The mood changed instantly. Oh, I know. Kiss Sophia. The room exploded. The legendary ship. Childhood sweethearts. Now that's entertainment. Do it for the plot. Sophia covered her face. You people seriously need hobbies. But she was laughing the same way she always laughed whenever those jokes came up. I forced a smile because this wasn't new. Sophia and Jason had known each other since they were children. Their families were close. They attended the same schools, the same vacations, the same social events. Years ago, everyone had assumed they would eventually end up together. Nothing had ever happened. But the jokes never disappeared even after Jason started dating me. At first, I thought people would stop. A year later, they still hadn't. Most of the time, I ignored it. Most of the time, Jason ignored it, too. Tonight should have been no different because Jason would obviously choose me. Right. Someone nudged him. Come on, kiss Sophia. Another friend immediately objected. Leave him alone. He should kiss Emma. She's literally his girlfriend. The room split into arguments. Half laughing, half serious. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to shut it down, waiting for him to laugh and say, of course I'm choosing Emma. Instead, he just sat there, smiling, thinking, considering it. My stomach tightened because Jason wasn't refusing. He wasn't telling everyone to stop. He wasn't defending me. He was actually thinking about it. The teasing got louder. Well, what's taking so long? Don't leave us hanging. Jason looked toward me. For a brief second, our eyes met. Then he looked away, toward Sophia. Something cold settled in my chest. Sophia stopped laughing. The room grew quieter. Everyone suddenly seemed interested in what would happen next. Jason slowly stood. The room erupted. Cheers, whistles, laughter. I looked up at him, expecting him to walk toward me. Instead, he turned and started walking towards Sophia. The room exploded. My heart stopped because, out of every woman in the room, Jason had chosen the one person he knew would hurt me. Sophia looked stunned. Jason stopped in front of her. The cheering became deafening. Someone even started recording. And as I sat there frozen in my chair, one thought repeated itself over and over in my head. He could have chosen her, his girlfriend, but he chose her. Part 2. Well, I'm single. For a moment, nobody moved. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. Sophia looked shocked. Jason looked nervous. I sat frozen in my chair, waiting, hoping, praying that he would laugh and say it was a joke. Instead, Jason held out his hand. The room erupted again. Sophia hesitated. I saw it, the uncertainty in her eyes, the brief moment where she could have said no. Then she glanced around at everyone cheering and slowly stood up. My chest tightened. Come on, don't be shy. The legendary ship is finally happening. Sophia laughed awkwardly. You people are insane. But she didn't walk away. Jason smiled, and somehow that hurt even more, because he looked comfortable, like this wasn't difficult for him at all. The crowd immediately started counting. 1, 2, 3. Then Jason kissed her. The room exploded. People cheered, whistled, clapped. Some even stood up. I heard laughter. I heard shouting. I heard someone yell, "About time." My fingers tightened around my glass. Jason could have chosen me. Nobody had stopped him. Nobody had forced him. He could have ended the teasing once and for all. Instead, he chose the one girl everyone spent the last year comparing me to. The kiss continued, and continued, and continued. Every second felt longer than the last. Nobody seemed to notice the way my smile had disappeared. Nobody seemed to care. Then someone beside me nudged my shoulder. Relax, Emma. I slowly turned. The girl laughed. It's just a game. Just a game. The words made something inside me crack. Eventually, the 2 minutes ended. The room erupted into applause. Jason stepped back. Sophia looked uncomfortable. Jason looked relieved. Several people immediately started teasing them. You two look good together. The chemistry is still there. Some things never change. I stared at the table. For the first time in a year, I stopped pretending those jokes didn't bother me, because maybe the problem wasn't the jokes. Maybe the problem was that nobody respected me enough to stop making them. The bottle spun again, round and round. The full slowing, then stopping directly in front of me. The room immediately erupted. Oh, Emma's turn. Perfect timing. I slowly looked up. Everyone was watching me, waiting, expecting. The host grinned. Truth or dare? Dare. The answer came instantly. Several people laughed. Now we're talking. The host thought for a second, then snapped his fingers. I dare you to kiss someone in this room. The room immediately relaxed. A few people laughed. Well, that's easy. Someone pointed toward Jason. Go get your boyfriend. Another person nodded. See, everything worked out. I almost laughed. Everything worked out. Was that what they thought happened tonight? Jason finally looked at me for the first time since the kiss. His expression softened, like he expected me to fix the situation, like he expected me to smile, walk over, kiss him, and make everything normal again. The funny thing was, 10 minutes ago, I probably would have. 10 minutes ago, I would have swallowed my feelings and laughed along with everyone else. But something had changed. Maybe it was the cheering. Maybe it was the recording. Maybe it was hearing it's just a game while my boyfriend kissed another woman. Whatever it was, I was done. I stood. Several people smiled, clearly expecting me to walk toward Jason. Jason himself looked relieved. Then I started walking toward him. The room watched. Jason smiled. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Then I walked right past him. The smile disappeared from his face. The room fell silent. I kept walking past Sophia, past the rest of the group, until I stopped in front of Ethan Vaughn. For the first time all night, the room became completely quiet. Ethan sat alone near the end of the table, one hand resting against his glass, watching me, calm, unreadable, the same way he always was. Even among people who had known each other for years, Ethan felt different, untouchable, like he existed above everyone else. No one joked with him the way they joked with everyone else. No one dared. I had spoken to him only a handful of times during the past year, yet somehow his gaze always made me feel seen. His dark eyes met mine. Neither of us spoke. The room seemed afraid to breathe. Then I asked, "Are you seeing someone?" A few people looked confused. Others looked horrified. Ethan studied me for several seconds, then answered simply, "No." I nodded. "Good." The confusion around the room doubled. Someone laughed nervously. "What is happening?" I ignored them, ignored Jason, ignored everyone. Then I said the words that changed everything. "Because I'm single." 2. Silence. Absolute silence. Jason shot to his feet. "What?" I didn't even look at him. My eyes stayed on Ethan. "May I?" For the first time, Ethan looked genuinely surprised. Not shocked, just surprised, like he hadn't expected the night to take this turn. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. A long second passed. Then Ethan slowly nodded. "Yes." A collective gasp swept through the room. I stepped closer and kissed him. For a brief moment, Ethan froze. Then his hand settled lightly against my waist, and he kissed me back. Not out of obligation, not because of the dare, because he wanted to. The room exploded. People stood up. Someone dropped a drink. Several others started shouting at the same time, but all I could hear was my pulse. When I finally pulled away, my breathing was uneven. The room stared at us like we had lost our minds. Then Ethan looked directly at me. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and in a voice only slightly louder than a whisper, he said, "You were the one who started this." The room went completely silent again, because somehow that sounded less like a joke and more like a promise. I finally turned around. Jason looked like someone had punched him in the chest. His face had gone completely pale. "Emma." I walked past him without stopping, without looking back. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape violently against the floor. Jason was following me. Part 3. "You broke up with me, Emma." Jason's voice followed me all the way down the hallway. I didn't stop. The hotel was large enough that the noise from the party faded quickly behind me. I reached the balcony overlooking the city and pushed open the glass doors. Cool night air hit my face. For the first time in the last 10 minutes, I could breathe. Unfortunately, it didn't last. The doors opened again. "Emma." Jason stepped outside. A few seconds later, more footsteps followed. Of course they did. Our entire audience had apparently decided to come along. By the time I turned around, half the friend group had gathered on the balcony, including Sophia. I almost laughed. How fitting. Jason ran a hand through his hair. "Can we talk?" "We're talking." His jaw tightened. "Not like this." I folded my arms. Then, "How would you like it?" The group exchanged nervous looks. For once, nobody seemed interested in making jokes. Jason took a step closer. "What was that back there?" I stared at him. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't believe he was asking. "What was what?" "You kissed Ethan." The irony was so ridiculous that I nearly smiled. Jason noticed my expression. His face hardened. "Emma." "No, seriously." I tilted my head. "What exactly are we discussing right now?" Jason's patience snapped. "You know what I'm talking about." I nodded slowly. "You're right." A flicker of relief crossed his face. Then I continued. "My kiss." "Exactly." I smiled. "Funny." Jason frowned. "Why?" "Because I was about to ask about yours." Silence. Several people looked away. Jason immediately exhaled. It was a dare. There it was. The excuse. The same excuse everyone had been using all night. I nodded. "You're right." His shoulders relaxed. Then I added, "So is mine." His expression darkened. "That's different." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because somehow he still didn't understand. "No." My voice turned cold. "The only difference is that everyone expected me to forgive you." The balcony fell silent. Jason stared at me. "You know I didn't mean anything by it." I looked directly at him. "Then why did you do it?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer. "Because there wasn't one. Not a good one anyway." I took a step forward. "The dare didn't tell you to kiss Sophia." Jason frowned. "It said kiss a girl." "Exactly." My voice sharpened. "A girl. Not Sophia. Not specifically Sophia. Any girl. Including me. Especially me. Because I was his girlfriend." Yet somehow he still chose her. The realization visibly hit some people standing behind him. I wasn't finished. I looked past Jason at the group, at the people who had spent an entire year making me feel like I didn't belong. And suddenly all the frustration I'd swallowed for months came rushing out. Actually, forget the dare. Nobody spoke. You know what the funniest part is? The group looked uncomfortable. You people have been disrespecting me for a year. Several faces froze. A few immediately looked guilty. Good, they should. One of the girls shook her head. Emma, that's not it is. My voice cut through hers. Sharp, firm, final. It absolutely is. Nobody tried interrupting again. I looked around the group. One face after another. Every party, every dinner, every gathering. I laughed bitterly. The same jokes. Nobody met my eyes because they knew exactly what I was talking about. Jason and Sophia, the legendary ship, the childhood sweethearts, the couple that should have happened. Each phrase landed harder than the last. I heard it for a year. My chest felt tight, but for once I wasn't holding anything back. Do you know what that feels like? Silence. I spent an entire year feeling like a guest in my own relationship. Nobody had a response, not even Jason. I turned toward Sophia. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Sophia looked uncomfortable. Good. I was uncomfortable for a year. Emma. No. She stopped immediately. I took a slow breath, then said what I'd wanted to say for months. Stop acting innocent. Her face paled. Around us, several people looked shocked. Others looked like they had expected this eventually. Sophia stared at me. I never you knew. The words came out colder than I intended. You knew exactly what people were doing. She fell silent. You knew exactly how uncomfortable it made me. Emma, I never encouraged. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. No. I stepped closer. You just never stopped it. Sophia's lips parted. No words came out because she couldn't deny it. Not honestly. Every time people teased her and Jason, every time they compared us, every time someone implied she was the better match, she laughed. She smiled. She let it continue. Maybe she hadn't started it, but she certainly enjoyed it. You liked being the exception. Her eyes widened. You liked being the girl everyone thought he should choose. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia looked like she had been slapped because deep down she knew there was truth in it. I turned back toward Jason. He looked exhausted, defeated, like the situation was finally sinking in. Emma. His voice sounded different now, softer, almost desperate. I wasn't interested. The dare didn't make you choose Sophia. I repeated the sentence, slowly so everyone would hear it. So stop blaming the dare. Jason lowered his head because for the first time all night he couldn't. Not anymore. The group had watched him think, watched him decide, watched him walk toward her. He had chosen, and now he had to live with it. I slipped the bracelet off my wrist, the silver one Jason gave me 6 months ago. His eyes immediately locked onto it. A tiny gesture, but somehow it hurt more than anything I'd said. I placed it in his hand. His fingers closed automatically. Emma. I looked directly at him. The moment you kissed her, his face went white. You broke up with me. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Jason stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But I was done explaining, done justifying, done pretending. I turned around and walked toward the doors. For a second, nobody followed. Then I heard footsteps. Not Jason's, not Sophia's, not anyone else's. I already knew who it was before I looked back. Ethan. He stopped beside the doorway, one hand in his pocket, completely calm despite the chaos he'd just helped create. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, neither of us said anything. Then Ethan glanced toward the group behind me, toward Jason, toward the stunned faces, and said only 4 words. You should go home. The words were directed at me, but somehow they felt like a challenge to everyone else. I stared at him, then nodded. For the first time all night, someone was treating me like my feelings mattered. I walked away, and this time I didn't look back. Part 4. The consequences. The next morning, I woke up to 43 unread messages. I stared at my phone for a full minute before setting it face down on the nightstand. I already knew what most of them would say. Some would tell me I had overreacted. Some would tell me Jason didn't mean it. Some would tell me to calm down. And a few would finally admit that what happened last night was messed up. None of it mattered because for the first time in a year, I wasn't interested in being understanding. I wasn't interested in being the bigger person. I was tired of swallowing my feelings, tired of pretending things didn't hurt, tired of acting grateful for basic respect. My phone buzzed again. Jason. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. Then I blocked his number. For the first time since our breakup, my apartment felt completely silent, and honestly, the silence was nice. Calm. The friend group, however, was not having a peaceful morning because once the excitement from the party disappeared, reality arrived, and reality was uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, especially for the people who had spent an entire year making those jokes. A group chat that was usually filled with memes and dinner plans had turned into a battlefield. One person finally wrote, "Looking back, maybe we took the Jason-Sophia thing too far." Another replied, "Maybe." A third person answered, "Okay, we definitely took it too far." For the first time, people started replaying memories. The jokes, the comments, the comparisons, the constant reminders that Sophia and Jason had history together. Things that seemed harmless individually, but after a year, not so harmless anymore because Emma had been right. Nobody had treated her like the girlfriend. They treated her like the replacement. Jason wasn't having a good morning either, or a good afternoon, or a good evening, because no matter how many times he replayed the party in his head, he always arrived at the same conclusion. He had chosen Sophia, nobody else. Him. The memory kept repeating. Someone saying, "Kiss Emma." Someone else saying, "Kiss Sophia," and him standing up and walking toward Sophia. Nobody forced him. Nobody dragged him there. Nobody made the decision for him. He made it himself, and somehow that realization hurt more than the breakup because there was no excuse. 3 days later, Jason finally met Sophia. The atmosphere was awkward from the start. Sophia looked exhausted. Jason probably looked worse. Neither knew what to say. Eventually, Sophia sighed. "I think Emma hates me." Jason rubbed his forehead. "Emma hates both of us." Sophia winced. "Fair." A long silence followed. Then, Sophia quietly said, "I should have stopped them." Jason looked up. "The jokes." She stared at her coffee. "I should have stopped them a long time ago." Jason didn't respond because, deep down, he knew she was right. And the worst part, so was Emma. A week after the breakup, I attended a charity luncheon alone. For the first time in a year, I wasn't arriving as Jason Carter's girlfriend, just Emerson Blair. It felt surprisingly freeing. The event was being held in one of the city's luxury hotels. The ballroom was filled with familiar faces, business leaders, socialites, investors, the usual crowd. I was halfway through a conversation when a familiar voice spoke beside me. "You're avoiding me." I nearly dropped my glass. I turned. Ethan Vaughn stood there, looking entirely too calm. I narrowed my eyes. "I'm avoiding you. You left before I could finish talking." I blinked. "At the party?" "Yes." I stared at him for a second, then another. Was he serious? Ethan calmly sipped his drink as if this conversation made perfect sense. I couldn't help laughing. "You're unbelievable." "So I've been told." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Then, someone called Ethan's name from across the room. Several executives were waiting for him. One of them looked nervous, which was honestly hilarious. Even powerful businessmen seemed intimidated by Ethan. He glanced toward them, then back at me. "I have to go." "Okay." He nodded once, then walked away. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't because, 3 days later, I ran into him again, and 4 days after that, and again after that. At first, I genuinely thought it was coincidence. Then I started noticing a pattern, a very suspicious pattern, because somehow Ethan kept appearing everywhere. The same coffee shop, the same events, the same charity functions, the same restaurants, the same networking dinners. It happened so often that eventually I stopped believing in coincidence. 2 weeks later, I walked into my favorite cafe, ordered my usual drink, turned around, and nearly groaned. Ethan was already sitting there, looking completely unsurprised, like he had expected me. I pointed at him. Immediately. "You." He looked up from his laptop. "Me." I narrowed my eyes. "This is getting ridiculous." His expression remained perfectly calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're following me." For the first time, I thought I saw amusement in his eyes, a very dangerous sign, because Ethan Vaughn almost never looked amused. He slowly closed his laptop, then leaned back in his chair and asked, "Do you have proof?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because annoyingly, I didn't. His mouth twitched. Definitely amusement. Definitely. I pointed at him again. "You are suspicious. That's a serious accusation." "I'm serious. So am I." I stared. He stared back. The silence lasted 3 seconds, then 5, then 7. Then Ethan calmly gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Sit down." I don't know why I listened. Maybe curiosity, maybe stubbornness, maybe because I was starting to enjoy these conversations more than I should. Either way, I sat. Ethan looked entirely satisfied with himself, which immediately annoyed me. "Stop that." "Stop what?" "Whatever that expression is." His eyes softened slightly, and for some reason, my heart skipped. Before I could figure out why, Ethan said, "You know," I immediately regretted sitting down because whenever Ethan started a sentence like that, trouble usually followed. "What?" His expression became suspiciously innocent. "You should take responsibility." I blinked. "What?" Ethan folded his hands. Calm, composed, completely serious. "You should take responsibility." I stared, then stared harder because I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. And somehow, I had a feeling I was about to find out. Part 5. Take responsibility. I stared at Ethan for several seconds, and I set my coffee down very carefully. Take responsibility for what? Ethan looked entirely serious, which somehow made it worse. He folded his hands on the table. "You announced you were single." I blinked. "What?" "You walked across an entire room." "Ethan, you asked if I was seeing someone." A few people nearby started glancing in our direction. I immediately lowered my voice. "Would you stop?" "No." His answer came so quickly that I nearly choked. Then he continued, "You asked if I was available." "You nodded." "You kissed me." I covered my face. "Oh my God." Ethan calmly leaned back, then delivered the final blow. "You started this." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Actually laughed. A real laugh. The kind I hadn't laughed in weeks. The kind that escaped before I could stop it. For a brief moment, Ethan's expression softened, almost like seeing me laugh had been his goal all along. The realization made my chest tighten, which was ridiculous. "So," I ignored it. "You're impossible." "So, I've been told." I pointed at him. "You know, that's not how any of this works, doesn't it?" "No." "Interesting." His tone suggested he completely disagreed. I groaned. "This conversation is over. It just started." I immediately stood up. Ethan looked entirely unbothered, which somehow annoyed me more. As I walked away, I heard him call after me, "Thursday." I turned. "What?" "7." I stared. He stared back. Neither of us blinked. Then realization hit. My jaw dropped. Was that a date invitation? It was. "You didn't ask." His expression remained calm. "You seem busy." I couldn't believe this man. Absolutely could not believe him. Then I walked away, still hearing his quiet laughter behind me. Thursday arrived. I had absolutely no intention of going. None whatsoever. Which was why I spent 20 minutes deciding what to wear. I hated myself. Truly, by 6:45, I was standing outside one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, staring at the entrance, questioning every decision that had led me here. Then a black luxury car pulled up. Ethan stepped out. His eyes immediately found mine. A small smile appeared. "You're late." I looked at my phone. It was 6:58. "You are unbelievable." "So, I've been told." I groaned. Again, this was becoming a habit. Dinner should have been awkward. Instead, it was surprisingly easy. For the first time, I saw a side of Ethan most people never did. He was still reserved, still composed, still intimidating. But beneath all of that, he was funny, dryly funny, dangerously funny. The kind of person who could make a single comment and leave you laughing 5 minutes later. At some point, one forgot I was supposed to be resisting him, which was probably a mistake. A very large mistake, because Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. Nothing escaped Ethan. Over the next few weeks, he became impossible to ignore. Not because of grand gestures, not because of expensive gifts, because of attention. The frightening kind of attention. The kind that made me wonder if he secretly had surveillance cameras installed everywhere. One afternoon, he handed me a small box. I opened it. Inside was a first edition copy of my favorite novel. I stared, then looked up. How did you know I wanted this? Ethan took a sip of coffee. You mentioned it. When? 8 months ago. I froze. What? He looked confused. You mentioned it 8 months ago. Ethan. Yes, that is not normal. A pause. Then. I disagree. I stared at him, completely speechless. The worst part, that wasn't even the first time. He remembered, clear as throat, everything. My favorite flowers, my favorite dessert, my favorite author, my preferred coffee order, the city I wanted to expand my family's foundation into, the business project I once mentioned wanting to start. Tiny things, things I barely remember telling people. Yet Ethan remembered all of them. Eventually, it became impossible to ignore. One evening, we were walking along the river after dinner. The city lights reflected across the water. The breeze was cool, comfortable, peaceful. I looked at Ethan, then narrowed my eyes. Immediately, he noticed. You have that look. What look? The suspicious look. I'm suspicious. Of me. Very. He looked almost amused. Should I be concerned? Yes. We continued walking. Then I stopped. Ethan stopped, too. I folded my arms and finally asked the question that had been bothering me for weeks. Why do you know so much about me? For the first time that evening, Ethan went quiet. Not long, just long enough for me to notice, which immediately made me even more suspicious. My eyes widened. Oh my God, Ethan sighed. A dangerous sign. A very dangerous sign. I pointed at him. Immediately. Oh my God. Several people nearby turned to stare. I didn't care. Ethan. He rubbed his forehead. Ethan. Emma. How long? Silence. My mouth slowly fell open. No way. Ethan looked away, and that alone told me everything. I stared, completely stunned, because suddenly all those little details made sense. The flowers, the books, the coffee, the way he always seemed to know exactly what to say, the way he paid attention to things nobody else noticed. The realization hit me like a truck. You liked me before this. Ethan remained silent, which was answer enough. My heart started beating faster. How long? Ethan looked at me, then sighed, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely cornered. I immediately pointed at him again. Don't you dare try to change the subject. A faint smile appeared, then disappeared, and Ethan finally said, Fine. I waited. So did he, for several seconds, until finally he spoke, and the answer changed everything. Part 6. 15 months. Fine. Ethan looked out across the river, then back at me. 15 months. I blinked. Once. Twice. Then my brain finally processed the number. 15 months. Ethan nodded. I immediately started doing the math. Then froze because 15 months ago was 3 months before Jason and I started dating. Slowly I lower my hand. Wait. Ethan already knew where this was going. No. Yes. No. Yes. My eyes widened. You liked me before Jason and I got together. Silence. That was answer enough. I stared at him, completely stunned. You liked me first. A muscle moved in Ethan's jaw. Apparently that wasn't how he would have phrased it. Unfortunately for him, it was exactly how I was phrasing it. Ethan. He sighed. I pointed at him. Again. When? A charity gala. The answer came immediately. I frowned. A charity gala. Ethan nodded. 15 months ago. I searched my memory. Then suddenly remembered a charity fundraising event hosted by several wealthy families and corporations. My family foundation had been one of the sponsors. I had attended because my mother insisted. The memory slowly returned. The ballroom, the speeches, the networking, the endless conversations. Then another memory surfaced. Much smaller, much less important. Or at least I had thought so. At the end of the event, most guests had already left. A few volunteers were still cleaning up. One elderly volunteer had been struggling to move several heavy donation boxes. I had stayed behind to help. That was it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing special. I looked at Ethan. That event. I blinked. You remember that. Ethan gave me a look. Clearly. I laughed. Softly. In disbelief. Out of everything that happened that night, that was what he remembered. Then another question hit me. Wait. Ethan immediately looked concerned, which meant he probably knew where my thoughts were heading. A dangerous sign. What happened after that? His expression became neutral. Too neutral. Suspiciously neutral. I narrowed my eyes. Ethan. He sighed. You really want the full story, obviously. For a moment, he seemed to debate it, then gave up. I asked around. I blinked. What? I asked around. Ethan. Emma. I stared. You were trying to find me. A brief pause. Then yes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You were actually looking for me. That tends to happen when someone wants to speak to another person. I ignored the sarcasm, mostly because I was too shocked. You never found me. I was working on it. I laughed. Actually laughed. The image was ridiculous. Ethan Vaughn, one of the most powerful men in the city, quietly asking people about a girl. The thought alone felt unreal. Then his expression changed slightly, and my laughter faded. What happened? For the first time that evening, Ethan looked genuinely annoyed. Not at me, at the memory. A major problem hit one of our overseas branches. I waited. I had to leave. How long? 3 months. My eyebrows rose. 3 months. That was a long time, especially in business. Ethan continued. I spent most of that time abroad. Suddenly things started making sense. The timeline, the gap, the missed opportunity. I folded my arms. Then what? Ethan was silent for a second, then another. Finally he answered. I came back. I waited. So I attended a gathering. Something about his tone made me suspicious again. What gathering? A dinner. His expression remained completely blank, which somehow made it worse. I narrowed my eyes. Ethan. He looked away. I immediately pointed at him. Oh my God. Several pedestrians turned to look. I ignored them. Again. Ethan. His shoulders dropped slightly, like a man accepting defeat. It was one of the circle's dinners. My mouth slowly fell open. No way. He remained silent. No way. And suddenly, I understood. Jason, the friend group, the timing, everything. I stared at him, completely speechless. When Jason introduced me, Ethan didn't answer because he didn't need to. I already knew. My voice became quieter. He introduced me as his girlfriend. A long silence followed. Then Ethan nodded once. That was all. One small nod. Yet, somehow it carried the weight of an entire story. I covered my face. Oh my God. The image appeared immediately. Jason smiling, throwing an arm around my shoulders, introducing me to everyone, completely unaware, and Ethan standing there, realizing the girl he'd spent months trying to find was already taken. That is horrible. It wasn't ideal. I laughed, then laughed harder, because somehow that was the most Ethan response imaginable. It wasn't ideal. No, you have the emotional range of a spreadsheet. That earned an actual laugh. A rare one. The sound surprised me enough that I almost stopped laughing myself. Almost. Then my smile faded slightly because there was one final question. One important question. I looked at him, and then Ethan's expression became calm again. Steady. Certain. The answer came without hesitation. Then nothing. I frowned. What do you mean? Nothing. You were in a relationship. Like that explained everything. Apparently to him it did. I stared. Ethan shrugged. What exactly was I supposed to do? I couldn't answer because there really was only one answer. Nothing. He couldn't do anything, and he hadn't. He never flirted, never interfered, never tried to create misunderstandings, never crossed a line. Not once. Because I was Jason's girlfriend. The realization settled heavily in my chest. For over a year, Ethan had simply stepped aside. Not because he stopped liking me, because he respected the relationship. I looked away first, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan ruined the moment completely. As far as I was concerned, that was the end of it. I narrowed my eyes immediately. As far as you were concerned. A faint smile appeared. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Ethan. He ignored me, then calmly continued. Then one day, I groaned. No, you walked across a room. Ethan. You announced you were single. Ethan. You asked if I was seeing someone. Ethan. You kissed me. I covered my face. The man was impossible. Absolutely impossible. When I finally looked up, Ethan seemed entirely satisfied with himself, which only made me want to throw something. So really, he paused, just long enough to make me suspicious. Then finished. You started this. I grabbed the nearest napkin and threw it directly at him. Ethan caught it effortlessly, without even looking, and somehow that annoyed me even more. But for the first time since my breakup with Jason, I realized something. The future no longer felt heavy because, when I looked at Ethan, I found myself smiling, and this time I didn't want to stop. Part 7, the one he lost. 3 months later, Jason Carter finally stopped trying to call me. Not because he had moved on, because he had finally accepted that I wasn't coming back. That realization had taken him longer than anyone expected, including him. For weeks after the breakup, he convinced himself I just needed space. Then, he convinced himself I was angry. Then, he convinced himself Ethan was a rebound. Then, he convinced himself I would eventually remember everything we'd shared together and come back. The problem was that reality kept proving him wrong because every time he saw me, I looked happier, lighter, like someone who had finally put down a burden she didn't realize she was carrying. And every time he saw Ethan beside me, another excuse died. Eventually, there were none left. I was leaving a charity board meeting when I heard someone call my name. Emma. I stopped. The voice was familiar, too familiar. Turning around, I found Jason standing a few feet away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was strange. A year together, countless memories, and now we felt like strangers. Jason smiled weakly. Do you have a minute? I considered saying no. Instead, I nodded. 1 minute. A shadow of amusement crossed his face. Still strict. Experience taught me to be. His smile faded. Fair enough. We walked to a quiet seating area nearby. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Jason looked nervous. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him nervous. Finally, he exhaled. I owe you an apology. I stayed silent. Jason looked down at his hands, then continued. For a long time, I kept telling myself it was just a dare. A bitter smile appeared. That excuse doesn't work anymore. No, it didn't. He laughed softly, without humor. I think I repeated it so many times because if it wasn't the dare, his voice trailed off. I already knew the rest. Then it was him, and only him. Jason looked up. His eyes were tired. I chose her. The words sounded painful. Good. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because he was finally being honest for the first time since the party. No excuses, no blame, no avoidance, just truth. Jason continued. I kept thinking about that night. His jaw tightened, and every single time I reached the same conclusion. Silence. I could have chosen you. I looked away, toward the city skyline beyond the window, because hearing it now didn't change anything. If anything, it only confirmed what I already knew. Jason smiled bitterly. I don't even know why I did it. I think part of me assumed you'd understand. His laugh sounded hollow. You always understood. The words hit harder than he probably realized. Because he was right. I always had. Every joke, every comparison, every uncomfortable moment. I understood. I forgave. I adapted until there was nothing left to give. Jason looked at me. I thought you'd stay. There it was. The truth. Not about the dare. Not about Sophia. About us. About the assumption that no matter what happened, Emma would stay. I smiled sadly, then answered. That was your mistake. Jason closed his eyes, only for a second, but it was enough. Enough to show the weight of those words. When he opened them again, they looked brighter, not happier, just clearer, like someone finally accepting a painful reality. I'm sorry. This time I believed him. Not because the apology was perfect, because it was honest. I nodded. Thank you. Jason looked surprised. Maybe he expected anger. Maybe he expected resentment. The truth was simpler. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required energy, and I had already spent enough energy on this chapter of my life. Jason hesitated, then asked quietly, Do you ever regret us? The question hung between us. I thought about it carefully. A year ago, I would have answered differently. 6 months ago, too. But now I knew the truth. I don't regret loving you. Hope flashed briefly across his face. Then I finished. I regret accepting less than I deserved. The hope disappeared. Not dramatically, not painfully, just quietly, like a door finally closing. And for the first time, Jason didn't try to stop it, because he knew there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to explain, nothing left to fix. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. This was one of them. A month later, another gathering was held. The first big gathering since the breakup drama. Everyone attended, including me, including Ethan, including Jason. The atmosphere was awkward for approximately 10 minutes. Then everyone realized nobody was going to start a fight. Life moved on, as it usually did. I was standing near one of the outdoor terraces when Sophia approached me, alone. I immediately knew this conversation had been coming. Sophia stopped in front of me, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. "Can we talk?" I nodded. For a moment, she seemed unsure where to start. Then she finally said, "You were right." I blinked. Sophia laughed weakly. "Not about everything." "Okay, maybe about most things." That surprised a laugh out of me, a small one, but still. Sophia looked relieved. Then her expression became serious again. I should have stopped it. I knew what she meant. The jokes, the comparisons, the constant comments. The year of disrespect disguised as humor. Sophia looked down. I liked the attention. The honesty caught me off guard. She shook her head. I didn't think about how unfair it was. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I nodded. "Thank you." Her shoulders visibly relaxed, like she'd been carrying those words for months. Maybe she had. Before leaving, Sophia smiled, a genuine one. "I hope you're happy." I looked across the terrace, toward Ethan. He was currently terrifying a group of executives without even trying. The poor men looked like they were attending a board meeting instead of a party. I couldn't help smiling. "I am." Sophia followed my gaze, then laughed. "You know, I think he's worse than you." I looked offended. Impossible. Very possible. Later that evening, I found myself standing beside Ethan. The city lights stretched endlessly below us. The party continued behind us. Laughter, music, conversation. For the first time since joining the circle, I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel like a guest. I didn't feel like someone borrowing a seat at someone else's table. I belonged, not because they accepted me, because I accepted myself. Someone from the group suddenly shouted, "So when exactly did this relationship start?" Several people immediately laughed. I pointed at Ethan. "Don't." His expression remained completely innocent, which meant trouble, a very familiar kind of trouble. Ethan glanced at me, then answered before I could stop him. Apparently, when she decided to start trouble, the group burst out laughing. I groaned. "You're never letting that go, are you?" "No." The answer came immediately. Of course it did. I rolled my eyes, then felt his hand slip into mine. Natural, easy, certain. And suddenly, I realized something. A year ago, I spent so much time to convince people that I belonged, trying to prove I was enough, trying to earn a place that should have already been mine. Now, I didn't need to, because the right people never made me compete for respect. The right people never made me question my worth. The right people chose me, and this time, one chose myself, too.